Female CEO waiting for plane with mute daughter. Froze when single dad spoke to her in sign language. The sound of boarding calls echoed through the airport, but Vanessa Reeves barely heard them. Her world had narrowed to the movement of her daughter's hands, quick, desperate, signing words she couldn't understand. And then, a man's voice behind her said softly, "She's asking about turtles." Vanessa froze. Vanessa Reeves was the kind of woman people wrote articles about. Forbes features, podcast interviews, women who lead panels. She'd mastered the boardroom, controlled chaos, conquered crises. But none of those victories meant anything now, sitting at gate 23, staring at the child who no longer looked back at her the same way. Ruby, 10 years old, hair tied in a messy braid, eyes deep enough to drown in. She was born deaf, and somehow, despite Vanessa's endless achievements, that was the one thing her mother had never learned to accept fully. The airport buzzed with life, coffee cups clinking, laughter from nearby gates, the rhythmic roll of suitcases. But inside Vanessa there was only silence. A silence that had stretched for years. The kind that didn't come from Ruby's world, but her own heart. Vanessa had taken this trip as a last attempt. Montana. A quiet place to reconnect before the custody decision next month. But even that plan already felt like another project, not a healing. She looked at Ruby, who was signing to herself. Slow, thoughtful movements, her lips parting in the faintest smile. Vanessa tried to follow, but it was useless. Her daughter spoke in light, and Vanessa lived in noise. A flight announcement boomed overhead, breaking her thoughts. Vanessa blinked, adjusting her blazer, armor in the shape of fabric. She didn't see the man watching from across the terminal, recognizing the language she struggled to understand. Ruby had been born in silence, not the peaceful kind, but the heavy kind that makes parents whisper, "What if?" Vanessa remembered the diagnosis like it had happened yesterday. Profound bilateral hearing loss, words that had felt like a sentence. She'd spent months pretending she could fix it. Specialists, technology, therapy, anything that would let her daughter hear her say, "I love you." But Ruby had her own way of hearing, through vibrations, smiles, light. Vanessa tried to learn ASL, signed flashcards on her nightstand, online classes between investor calls. But somewhere along the way, she'd stopped. Work came first. Always. She told herself she'd catch up later, but later never came. Now, Ruby was 10 and their conversations were shallow. Hungry? Homework? Sleep? Functional words for a mother and daughter who'd forgotten how to feel together. Ruby sat cross-legged beside her, hugging her worn turtle backpack. She'd had it since preschool, green, patched, loved. Vanessa had tried to replace it once, offering a sleeker one. Ruby refused. That bag was her safe place, the one thing that hadn't changed. Vanessa's phone buzzed. A text from her assistant. Investor call moved to Monday. Confirm? She typed back automatically. By the time she looked up, Ruby was staring out the window, the reflection of airplanes flickering in her eyes. Vanessa wondered what her daughter was dreaming about, then wondered if Ruby ever dreamed about her. Across the gate, a man in a faded jacket watched them quietly, recognizing the familiar loneliness in Ruby's movements. He knew that silence. He'd lived it too. "Excuse me," a voice said. Vanessa looked up. Startled, the man was maybe in his early 40s, jeans, worn boots, kindness written in every line on his face. There was something steady about him, like he'd weathered storms and learned to stay gentle anyway. He crouched to Ruby's level and signed something. Hands fluid, graceful. Vanessa froze. Ruby's eyes widened, her entire face lighting up. She signed back so fast Vanessa could barely follow. They were talking, not fragments, not translations. Real conversation, the kind that filled the air with invisible music. Vanessa's throat tightened. The man laughed softly, replying in sign. Then he looked at Vanessa and smiled. "Sorry, I should have asked first," he said, switching to English. "I just saw her signing alone. My daughter's deaf too." He extended a hand. "Cal Brennan." Vanessa blinked, shaking his hand automatically. "Vanessa Reeves. And this is Ruby." Cal turned back to Ruby, signing her name. Fingers gentle, eyes kind. "That's a beautiful name," he said. "Like the stone." Ruby grinned. "Sign something quick." Cal chuckled, glancing at Vanessa. She says you picked it because rubies are rare and strong. Vanessa stared. She had said that years ago in the hospital when Ruby was still small enough to fit in her arms. No one else knew. Cal must have seen something shift in her expression. She's proud of that, you know, he said quietly. She told me. Vanessa's eyes burned. For the first time in years, her daughter's words reached her. Not through a phone, not through an interpreter, but through a stranger's hands. Cal sat beside them. And within seconds, Ruby was laughing silently, freely, like sunlight spilling into shadows. Vanessa watched, half in awe, half in ache. The man wasn't just signing. He was listening. Every nod, every smile, every shift of his eyebrows was a dialogue. Ruby signed about her favorite book, about drawing, about a turtle named Bean she wanted someday. Cal responded with stories about his own daughter, Isa, who loved painting too. They spoke a language Vanessa had never truly known. She caught fragments. Happy, friend, summer, home, but the rhythm was too fast. She felt like a tourist in her own child's world. Cal's voice broke the silence. You've learned ASL, right? I tried, Vanessa admitted. But life got busy, he nodded slowly. It does. But silence doesn't wait for us. She looked at him then, really looked. His jacket was faded, his boots scuffed, but his presence was warm, and there was something behind his calm, a quiet grief, tucked neatly away. Ruby tugged his sleeve, signing again. Cal smiled. She's asking if she can talk to Isa, my daughter. Vanessa hesitated, a stranger. The airport. The world telling her to be cautious, but Ruby's eyes, those pleading, shining eyes, left her no choice. Okay, she said softly. Cal pulled out his phone, opened a video call. A young girl appeared on screen, brown eyes, a gap-toothed smile. Ruby's whole body lit up. The two girls began signing rapidly, laughing, sharing secrets across miles and screens. And for the first time in years, Vanessa saw Ruby, not as broken, but as whole. Vanessa couldn't look away. Her daughter's laughter, silent but radiant, filled the air with something heavier than sound. Cal held the phone steady, letting the girls talk. Occasionally he'd translate softly. She's telling Isa about her turtle backpack. Now, she's saying she wants to visit Montana. Now they're arguing about which color is better, in purple or blue. Vanessa smiled faintly, blinking away tears. Ruby's face glowed with joy she hadn't seen in months. It was like watching her rediscover herself, the version of her that the world often ignored. When the call ended, Ruby turned to Vanessa, signing quickly. Vanessa caught maybe half. Friend, fun, visit. She looked helplessly at Cal. She's asking if she can visit Isa this summer, he translated. Vanessa exhaled, laughing through tears. Of course she can. Ruby's smile widened, a rare, unguarded smile. She hugged her backpack to her chest as if holding joy itself. After a moment, Cal said quietly, "You're doing better than you think." Vanessa turned toward him. Am I? He nodded. She feels loved. That's more than most parents manage. Vanessa's eyes stung. For the first time in a long while, she let herself breathe. But just then the loudspeaker crackled. Flight 62 to Montana delayed another hour. Cal sighed, smiling wryly. Guess we've got time. Something Vanessa had always claimed she didn't have. But maybe, today, time was finally giving her a second chance. The minutes slipped by softly, the kind of quiet that didn't demand to be filled. Cal leaned back in his chair, watching Ruby sketch something in her notebook. Vanessa studied him. Curious, there was a steadiness in the way he breathed. A man who'd learned to live without noise, without rush. You said your daughter's deaf too? Vanessa asked gently. Cal nodded, eyes warm. Yeah, Isa's 9. She was born hearing but lost it after meningitis when she was 2. Vanessa blinked. That must have been hard. He smiled faintly. It was, my wife. She didn't take it well. Thought it was a punishment. She left 2 years later. The words hung between them, heavy yet delivered without bitterness. I moved back to Montana, Cal continued. My mom helps with Isa. I work construction during the week. Teach sign language at a community center on weekends. Vanessa studied his hands, rough, scarred, but moving with gentle certainty. He wasn't rich, he wasn't polished, but he understood. I used to think silence was the enemy, Cal said softly. Then Issa taught me it's just a different way of hearing. Vanessa looked at Ruby, who was now signing something about airplanes to Issa over text. Her throat tightened. She'd spent so long trying to pull Ruby into her noisy world, never realizing that maybe she was the one who needed to learn how to listen differently. For the first time, Vanessa didn't check her phone. She didn't think about emails, deadlines, or meetings. She just watched her daughter, and the man who spoke her language, and wondered if the universe had finally brought her the translator her heart had needed all along. It started as small talk, weather, delays, travel plans. But soon, the conversation deepened. Vanessa found herself saying things she hadn't said out loud in years. Sometimes I feel like I'm failing her, she whispered. Everyone sees this powerful woman who runs a company, but I can't even understand my own daughter. Cal didn't interrupt. He didn't give advice, he just listened, eyes steady, expression soft. She signs so beautifully, Vanessa said, voice cracking, and I can't keep up. It's like she's growing farther away every day. I tell myself I'm too busy, that I'm doing all this for her future. But what good is a future if she feels alone now? Cal nodded, leaning forward. You know what Issa once told me? She said deafness isn't the hard part. Loneliness is. Vanessa's breath caught. She doesn't need you to be perfect, Cal continued. She just needs you to show up, hands, heart, and all. Even if you mess up every sign, she'll see you trying. That's what love looks like in her world. Vanessa felt tears slide down her cheeks before she could stop them. She turned away, embarrassed, but Cal didn't look away. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a napkin from a coffee shop and handed it to her quietly. Your daughter's lucky, he said softly. You didn't give up. Most parents do. Vanessa looked at him, really looked, and for the first time felt seen. Not as a CEO, not as a mother failing to keep up, but as a woman trying her best to love in a language she barely knew. Watch, Cal whispered. Ruby was showing Issa something on his phone, a tiny drawing she'd made of two turtles swimming side by side. Issa clapped, then signed something. Ruby beamed and added more details with her pencil. She's telling Issa that turtles move slowly, Cal translated with a small smile, but they always find their way home. Vanessa's lips parted. She said that, he nodded. Yeah, she says she's one of them. Vanessa's heart clenched. That one word, home. How long had Ruby been trying to find hers? She leaned forward, watching every motion, every flick of her daughter's hands. The grace, the confidence, the voice. For years, Vanessa had thought Ruby's silence meant absence. Now she realized it was fullness, a language so rich she just hadn't learned how to hear it. Cal nudged her gently. Want me to teach you something? Vanessa hesitated, then nodded. He lifted his hands, slow and deliberate. This is I'm proud of you, he said, showing her the motion. She copied him, trembling slightly. Cal smiled. Good, now tell her. Vanessa turned toward Ruby. Her hands shook. Ruby looked up, curious. Vanessa signed it, haltingly, imperfectly. I'm proud of you. For a moment, Ruby just stared. Then her eyes filled. And she signed something back so quickly Vanessa almost missed it. Cal whispered, smiling. She said, I know. The dam inside Vanessa broke. And for the first time in years, her tears weren't from exhaustion. They were from understanding. The airport lights dimmed slightly as evening crept closer. Outside, planes taxied against a pink and gold sky. Inside, the three of them sat in quiet warmth, a small, fragile world built between boarding gates and delays. Ruby had fallen asleep on Vanessa's lap, her turtle backpack tucked under her arm. Cal watched her with a soft smile. She's peaceful, he said. Vanessa brushed a strand of hair from Ruby's face. She hasn't slept on me in years. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was alive, filled with what they didn't need to say. Cal's phone buzzed. A message from his mother. Storm's getting worse here. He might be stuck overnight, he looked up. Looks like they're delaying again. Vanessa exhaled. I don't mind, she turned to him. You said you teach sign language? Yeah, Cal nodded. Community classes. Families, teachers, sometimes couples trying to reconnect. Vanessa smiled faintly. Maybe I should enroll. Cal tilted his head, teasing. Or maybe start now. You've already got one student. He nodded toward Ruby. Vanessa's chest tightened again. But this time it was a good ache. The kind that meant growth. Her hands moved and hesitant but sure, repeating the phrase he'd taught her earlier. I'm proud of you. Cal smiled softly. You'll be fluent before you know it. Vanessa looked down at her sleeping daughter and whispered, I just want to be fluent in her. Cal's eyes glimmered. That's the most important language there is. While Ruby slept, Vanessa scrolled absently through her emails, habit more than purpose. But then she saw one from Ruby's school interpreter, sent weeks ago. Subject, Ruby's essay, you should read this. Vanessa opened it. It was a scanned page in Ruby's careful handwriting. The title, The Sound of My Mom's Hands. Vanessa read silently. My mom talks with her eyes. She doesn't always understand my words, but she tries. I think her hands are shy but brave. Sometimes I wish she knew that I hear her even when she doesn't sign. I hear her heart. By the end, tears blurred the screen. Cal noticed. You okay? Vanessa turned the phone toward him, voice trembling. She wrote this for school. He read quietly, his face softening. She sees more than you think. Vanessa wiped her eyes. I've spent years worrying she couldn't hear me. But she's been listening all along. Outside, rain began to fall. Soft and steady, like punctuation to a revelation. Vanessa closed the email and looked at Ruby, asleep and peaceful. For once, she didn't feel like a failure. She felt like a mother who was finally learning her child's music, even if she'd been deaf to it for too long. Hours later, the boarding gate buzzed with noise. Travelers gathering their bags, final announcements echoing through the speakers. Vanessa and Ruby sat close, still caught between silence and something unspoken. Then her phone rang. The name flashing on the screen froze her. Ethan Moore, the man she once loved. The man Ruby had never met. She hesitated. Her pulse quickened, her throat dry. Ruby noticed the shift in her mother's face, the way her shoulders tensed. Vanessa pressed accept. Ethan? Her voice was careful, fragile. I heard about your father, Ethan said softly. I'm sorry, Vanessa, I didn't know how to call before now. The crowd around her blurred into silence. Ruby's eyes searched her face, curious but patient. I can't talk long, Vanessa whispered. I'm with Ruby, a pause. Then Ethan asked, does she still not speak? Vanessa's eyes flickered toward her daughter. So full of life, so full of language that didn't need words. No, she said quietly. She speaks in her own way now. When she hung up, she felt lighter, not because Ethan had returned, but because she realized something powerful. She no longer needed him to fill the silence. The gate opened. People began lining up. Vanessa helped Ruby with her backpack, tightening the straps gently. But then, Ruby tugged on her sleeve and signed, Wait. Vanessa stopped. Ruby turned toward the man and his daughter sitting nearby. The same single dad, Michael, and his little girl, Emma. The two children exchanged shy smiles, hands moving in small gestures that carried laughter and connection. Michael stood smiling at Vanessa. Seems they've made friends, he said. Vanessa laughed softly. Kids do that better than we do. Then Michael hesitated. I wasn't sure if I should say goodbye. She met his eyes. I'm glad you did. The PA system called for passengers. Maybe, Michael said quietly. Some goodbyes don't have to be forever. Vanessa didn't reply, she just smiled. A small knowing curve that said maybe you're right, high above the clouds. The world below looked peaceful, small, quiet, almost manageable. Ruby was asleep, her head resting against Vanessa's arm. Vanessa looked out the window and thought about how life had shifted in just a few hours. From isolation to connection, from fear of silence to understanding it. She took Ruby's small hand and traced the sign slowly. Love you. Even in her sleep. Ruby's fingers moved, completing the phrase. Love you too. Tears welled in Vanessa's eyes, not from sadness, but from a strange kind of peace. For the first time in years, the silence didn't feel like distance. It felt like home. When they landed, night had already draped the city in quiet light. The airport lights shimmered on polished floors as Vanessa and Ruby stepped through the crowd. Outside the gate, a tall woman stood waiting, Vanessa's sister, Claire. The moment their eyes met, time collapsed between them. Claire rushed forward, pulling Vanessa into a tight embrace. "I'm so glad you came," she whispered. Vanessa smiled, feeling Ruby's small hand between them. "We both needed to." Ruby looked up at her aunt and signed hello, shy but sure. Claire didn't understand, but smiled anyway. Vanessa laughed softly. "Don't worry. I'll teach you." For the first time in years, family didn't feel like pressure. It felt like belonging. Later that night, in her childhood room, Vanessa found an old wooden box in her father's study. Inside lay a folded piece of paper in his handwriting. "Vanessa, life will give you silence, not as punishment, but as a chance to listen deeper. Speak with your heart. The rest will follow." She pressed the letter to her chest. Outside the window, Ruby's laughter filled the air. Soft, wordless, beautiful. Vanessa smiled through tears, whispering, "I finally understand, Dad." And in the faint reflection of the glass, she could almost see him smiling back. Sometimes, the world's loudest lessons come in silence. Vanessa learned that love doesn't always need sound. It just needs presence, patience, and courage. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, because somewhere, someone needs to be reminded that silence can also speak love.